Hey, good evening. Thank you for joining us today. Today again we have with us an art of living expert and an officer of the Vedic Dhamma Sansan. So when Gurudev says when you are stuck in life, you must be careful. What does this really mean? Gurudev says day two began by addressing a universal human experience feeling stuck. When he says we must be careful, it's not about becoming anxious or hyper alert, but about becoming conscious when life slows down or becomes entangled. The mind tends to panic, exaggerate, and imagine consequences far worse than reality. Gurudev reminds us that the first step is awareness. How am I dealing with the situation? In the art of living framework, this means observing your breath, calming your nervous system, and grounding yourself before reacting. Most people act from the problem, not towards a solution. Carefulness is simply bringing mindfulness, inner stability, and patience when the outer world becomes turbulent. In the Vedic tradition, the moment you feel stuck is actually the moment you must become inward looking. Scriptures say, the apadanam samutmane buddhi kuryat nirvrittim. In danger, return to wisdom. Gurudev echoes the same. Be careful not to worsen the situation by impulsive decisions. Rituals like the chanting, the homas, and the parayanas give clarity because they quiet the emotional storms. And carefulness is a spiritual alertness, not fear. Now, Gurudev narrates the childhood incidents to show how fear exaggerates situations. Why does he use such stories? The Gurudev often uses light, humorous, almost innocent childhood stories because they bypass my adult's mind's defense. When he recounts how children panicked while sleeping in a restaurant or playing in water, he illustrates how irrational fears take over even though the situation is harmless. As adults, we behave the same way. Small email, a minor financial issue, or a misunderstanding suddenly becomes a huge problem in our head. By speaking through stories, Gurudev melts heaviness and makes us realize if children can make mountains out of a molehill, so can we. This creates instant relaxation. Now, in Vedic Dhamma tradition, stories or itihasa kathana are considered one of the highest methods of imparting wisdom. It allows the mind to connect emotionally. Gurudev's stories act like mirrors. We see our own fears reflected. His point is fear makes us react before understanding. Through narrative, he restores simplicity and innocence in perception. Gurudev repeatedly says, we are scared, problems will come. Why is fear of problems worse than the problem itself? Gurudev, fear of the future drains energy from the present. Most of our suffering is not from what is happening, but from what we anticipate. Gurudev emphasizes this beautifully on day two. You are scared that you will face a lot of problems. This fear becomes heavier than the actual challenge in the art of living. This is called a second arrow. The imaginary suffering we add on top of real suffering. Sudarshan Kriya helps to solve this anticipatory anxiety, bringing you back into the now, where solutions become visible in the Vedic worldview. Fear or bhaya is formed from duality when we feel separate from the divine. Gurudev reminds us that the divine has carried us through every difficulty before. The same power will carry us same. Hence, the fear of problems dissolves when devotion or shraddha awakens. Rituals like the Durga Homa and the Vishnu Sahasranama recitation strengthen inner courage and invoke the divine protection. Now, why does Gurudev emphasize that people don't know how much a problem will actually affect them? Because the mind constantly miscalculates. When Gurudev says that you don't know how much effect it will have on you, he reveals how uncertainty magnifies fear. The unknown is frightening. The mind imagines the worst case scenario because it seeks control. However, most problems in life turn out to be far less impactful than we feared. Through meditation, the nervous system becomes resilient. We start observing problems rather than absorbing them. In the Vedic worldview, karma unfolds with precision. No event in life is random. Therefore, the anxiety of how much will it affect me comes from ignorance of the cosmic order. Gurudev's statement is an invitation to trust the larger intelligence. When one performs the daily Sandhya Vandanam, chants, or homas, the mind becomes attuned to dharma and fear of consequences reduces automatically. Now, Gurudev narrates the story of seeing the river, sitting by the water, and moving across regions. How do these images relate to life's flow? There, the water is one of the Gurudev's favorite metaphors. The river symbolizes the movement of time and situations. When he describes sitting on the bank, then suddenly moving to Kerala or Gujarat, the subtle messages life carries us from one phase to another effortlessly. Problems too come and go like rivers flowing. Nothing is permanent. When we resist, we drown. When we flow, we glide. The story is a poetic reminder of impermanence and surrender. Rivers in the Vedas represent the Rita, the orderly cosmic flow. Gurudev is subtly teaching that life is governed by rhythms just like rivers follow the natural routes. A person aligned with Dharma flows gracefully despite obstacles. In rituals, offering water or arghya represents letting go of resistance. Gurudev says river imagery carries this ancient teaching into modern languages. Now, what does Gurudev mean when he say everyone eventually leaves the places, the people, the nations? Rather, it refers to the transient nature of worldly existence. Gurudev says, like I left the people of Gujarat too left, the whole nation left. He is not speaking literally. He means that every phase, like every group, every relationship changes. Nothing and no one stays forever in the same form. This realization is string when we stop clinging to permanence, problems lose their heaviness. The art of healing techniques cultivate this inner fluidity. From the Vedic lens, this is Anitya Bhavana, the contemplation of impermanence. Even the greatest of kingdoms, the heroes, the dynasties, all pass. Gurudev uses this to soften attachment. When attachment loosens, suffering reduces. Yagyas and Parayanas teach the same truth. Everything offered returns to the universe. Now, Gurudev says, you people are also cruel. You are just like me. What is the deeper meaning? At first, this sounds humorous or paradoxical. Gurudev is reflecting how the mind judges itself harshly. People often think, why am I like this? Why do I get scared? Why do I get angry? He calls the audience cruel playfully, meaning you judge yourself too much, and then he adds, you are just like me. Dissolving that judgment, he brings everyone to equality, teacher and seeker, both human and both vulnerable. In the Vedic tradition, a guru often uses paradox to break mental stiffness. By calling people cruel, Gurudev is teasing them for overthinking and overworrying. The follow up, you are just like me, establishes unity. The divine is not distant, the guru is not separate. This is Advaita in every language. Now, what is the significance of Gurudev's reference to being mother of 10 and father of 10? Then this metaphor points to expansion of identity. Gurudev is showing that when you dissolve ego, you belong to everyone. You become nurturing like a mother, protective like a father, and compassionate like a friend. Problems no longer feel personal because your identity has widened. Meditation actually expands the sense of belongingness in Vedic philosophy. Every realized being is considered a Loka Mata or a Loka Pita, the mother, father of the world. Gurudev reveals that spiritual maturity is not about isolation, but expansion of affection. Such expanded consciousness makes personal problems appear small. Now, Gurudev speaks about the 10th mantra. Why mention it during a discussion on problems? Yeah, the 10th month symbolizes completion, the arrival of something new. Gurudev certainly hints that problems to have a gestation period. They will complete their cycle just like pregnancy ends with the birth. A problem ends with a new possibility. He uses cyclical imagery to remind the mind that challenges are temporary. In Vedic astrology, the 10th house relates to karma, duty, and destiny, mentioning the 10th month invokes symbolism of maturity, culmination, and fruition. Gurudev uses it to indicate every problem has its destined end. Endure with patience. Now, Gurudev says a mother cannot change her child's nature. How does this help us deal with problems? It's a profound lesson in acceptance. Just as a mother cannot change the core nature of her child, we cannot control every aspect of life. Problems arise when we resist what cannot be changed. When we accept reality, clarity emerges to engage with what can be changed. Gurudev's point is stop fighting the unchangeable, shift from emotional agitation to practical action. In the Vedic tradition, this is a Swabhava Dharma. Every being has an inherent nature. Recognizing this reduces frustration when we accept the unchangeable. Our energies align with Dharma rather than conflict. This is the spiritual maturity Gurudev is pointing towards. Now, Gurudev speaks about mothers who cannot. Jai Gurudev. So, what does Gurudev mean by saying, yes, Gurudev, Jai Gurudev, when they are close, their heart becomes spacious? What is the significance of this? He indicates that closeness emotionally or spiritually expands the heart. When you feel connected, your inner space broadens, tolerance increases, fear reduces, and compassion grows. Problems feel lighter simply because your heart is larger. This is why in art of living, satsang, seva, and collective practices are emphasized. The shared energy expands your inner capacity. When the heart is spacious, small problems no longer suffocate the mind. In Vedic philosophy, the heart is the seat of Hridaya Akasha, the inner sky. When we experience love or connection, this inner sky expands. Gurudev is teaching that spiritual practices open their inner space. A spacious heart can accommodate difficulties just as the sky accommodates clouds. They pass without disturbing the vastness. Now, how does this idea of spacious heart help us practically when challenges appear unexpectedly? A spacious heart means you respond rather than react. When the heart is small, even minor inconveniences feel unbearable. But when the heart is expanded through meditation, compassion, and wisdom, problems lose their weight, a sudden difficulty becomes manageable, the nervous system becomes less reactive. Gurudev's teaching here is psychological and energetic. Inner expansion reduces emotional suffocation. In the Vedic tradition, a person with a spacious heart is called a Udara, noble, generous, and internally expansive. Such a person remains unshaken by sudden karmic disturbances. Rituals like a Rudrahoma or a Devi Homa cleanse inner contraction caused by fear or anger. Gurudev's wisdom echoes this ancient principle. Spiritual expansion is the antidote to worldly contraction. Now, Jayadev, why does Gurudev emphasize that fear makes us think the problem is bigger than it really is? Jayadev, because the mind amplifies uncertainty. Gurudev often says fear is an illusion projected into the future. When fear takes over, the imaginative mind creates exaggerated outcomes. This makes a simple issue appear like a crisis. To techniques like Sudarshan Kriya, the stress response reduces, allowing the intellect to evaluate situations clearly. When the fog of fear lifts, reality appears much more manageable. From a Vedic standpoint, fear arises from forgetting one's divine nature. Scriptures say, Dvityadvaya bhayam bhavati. Fear comes from duality. When you feel separate from divine support, problems appear monstrous. Gurudev points out that so seekers return to faith and surrender. When devotion arises, the fear shrinks. Now, how do art of living techniques specifically help in resolving this exaggerated perception of problems? Pranayama stabilizes the breath, which stabilizes emotions. Sudarshan Kriya resets the autonomic nervous system, reducing anxiety. Meditation gives a cooling space where thoughts lose their heat. When the physiology becomes calm, perception becomes accurate. Gurudev's objective is not to remove problems, but to transform the inner experience so that problems do not dominate our mind. Practitioners often report feeling lighter and more capable of handling challenges after Kriya. The Vedic lens sees breath as the prana shakti. When prana is disturbed, perception becomes distorted. The homas, the mantras, and the yagyas rectify the pranic field externally, just like a pranayama does internally. Both systems complement each other. Gurudev's teachings integrate the ancient Vedic wisdom with modern energetic techniques. Now, Gurudev narrates the river imagery. How does the flowing river relate to the way we should handle life? A river doesn't resist bends, rocks, or changes in terrain. It flows. Gurudev uses this as a metaphor for resilience. Life will have unpredictable twists, but when the mind is flexible, challenges become part of the journey rather than obstacles. Flowing with life doesn't mean passivity, it means non resistance. You respond from clarity, not fear. This is the essence of equanimity taught in Art of Living. Now, in Vedic symbolism, a river embodies the samsara, the continuous flow of existence. The wise person flows with the divine rhythm rather than struggling against it. Ritual water offerings and pujas remind devotees to surrender rigidities and rigidness and embrace divine guidance. Gurudev reinterprets this ancient idea for the modern seeker. Now, Gurudev mentions shifting from one state to another, from one region to another. What is the metaphor behind this? Rather, he is illustrating how life transitions naturally without our control. Just as we move from place to place, life moves us from phase to phase, the childhood, the youth, the adulthood, the old age. Problems too shift, emotional state shift, and no state is permanent. This understanding brings deep relaxation when you realize nothing lasts, neither joy nor sorrow. Attachment reduces and wisdom grows. In Vedic thought, this represents a parivartana, the continuous transformation. Every circumstance is temporary. Gurudev uses geographic movement as a metaphor to teach spiritual detachment. When one accepts the impermanence of external conditions, the inner peace strengthens. Now, why does Gurudev highlight that everyone eventually leaves the country, the nation, and the world? Is it not pessimistic? Jayadeva not at all. Gurudev is not being negative. He is being liberating. His point is if everything is temporary, why fear, why cling? Why worry excessively when you accept impermanence, you live fully? Problems lose their grip because you stop expecting the world to behave permanently. This clarity creates fearlessness. The Vedic scriptures repeatedly remind us of anitya or impermanence to cultivate vairagya or detachment. This is not pessimism, it is wisdom. Gurudev's teaching aligns with this. When you stop expecting permanent, suffering reduces and gratitude increases. You value the present moment deeply. Now, what inner transformation happens when we accept this impermanence deeply? Acceptance of impermanence brings freedom. You stop resisting change. You stop learning, fearing loss, and your mind becomes fearful and your mind becomes peaceful. Life becomes a series of experiences rather than problems. Meditation deepens this acceptance experientially, not intellectually. Your inner stability becomes independent of external fluctuations. In Vedic understanding, acceptance of impermanence is the first doorway to jnana or the wisdom. It awakens the inner detachment, dissolves the egoic expectations, and connects the seeker to the eternal self, which never changes. Gurudev's teachings guide seekers toward this timeless realization through accessible language and practical examples. Now, Gurudev says problems appear big only because we stand too close to them. How do we create that distance? Now, the Gurdjieff's words point toward an inner psychological distance. When a problem is right at your nose, it appears you just like if you hold your finger too close to your eye. The meditation, the pranayama, and silence are tools that pull the mind back, creating space. When you step back internally, the same problem appears smaller, more manageable, and less emotionally charged. This distance is not about ignoring the issue, it's about not drowning in it. In artifacting courses, students learn to expand their awareness so that challenges become just one small part of a much larger life canvas. The problem remains, yet your relationship with it transforms entirely. Now, in Vedic wisdom, this distance is known as the drashta bhava, the attitude of the witness. By witnessing rather than identifying, you become separate from the agitation. Rituals like chapa, the homa, the puja elevate consciousness from the reactive plane to the witnessing plane. The subtle shift is exactly what Gurudev points to. When the mind becomes the sky, problems become clouds. Now, Gurudev narrates childhood fear and crying as a metaphor. What is its deeper meaning? The story of the crying child afraid of a person approaching is symbolic of how adults behave emotionally when confronted with difficulties. Just like the child imagines a threat bigger than reality, we too amplify situations with mental noise. Gurudev uses simple childhood imagery to show that our reactions are often immature, even if we appear grown up. Through meditation and wisdom, we learn emotional maturity, calmness, clarity, and trust. Gurup's gift is to make profound psychological insights relatable through stories from daily life. In the Vedic tradition, stories are tools for Upadesha, the conveying moral and spiritual truth. This story reflects the Upanishadic principle that fear arises from ignorance or avidya. The child's fear is not of the man but of the unknown. Adults too fear uncertainty. The knowledge of the Vidya, devotion, and the clarity dissolve such fear. Gurudev echoes this ancient approach by using playful anecdotes to convey the deeper truths. Now, why does Gurudev say the problem will come as if it is certain? Jaydev, because problems are part of the life's design. Gurudev does not sugarcoat reality. He accepts it gracefully. Just as seasons change, the challenges appear naturally. Expecting a life without problems is unrealistic and leads to disappointment. But understanding that problems are temporary and manageable makes us resilient. Gurudev wants seekers to reach a state where problems do not create panic. When you know storms will come and go, you prepare internally. The Sudarshan Kriya builds such inner strength. Now, from a Vedic perspective, problems arise due to the unfolding of past karma, the prarabdha. No one is exempt. Even divine incarnations experience challenges. Gurudev's statement aligns with the Bhagavad Gita, stating that sukha dukkhe sammakritva. One should remain balanced in joy and sorrow. Problems are not punishments, they are part of karmic purification. When this understanding, fear disappears. Now, how does the wisdom help us differentiate between real danger and imagined danger? There, the wisdom gives clarity. Gurudev says the mind loves dramatization. When we lack wisdom, minor issues become emotional storms. Wisdom acts like a torch that shows whether the snake we fear is actually just a rope. Regular satsangs, the meditation, and the guidance refines the perception. Empty fears dissolve, real risks become clear, and we act appropriately without panic. This is why wisdom must accompany the spiritual practice. It becomes the compass of life. Now, in the Vedic framework, this is the difference between the bhaya, the true danger, and the samasya bhava, or the fear born from doubt. Scriptures say ignorance creates hallucinations in the mind. Guru's wisdom dispels the darkness of misunderstanding. Gurudev's teachings directly reflect this role of the guru, removing misconceptions so the seeker perceives reality. Now, Gurudev mentions that even animals can sense problems. What does this signify about human intuition? Neither animals rely on instinct, humans rely on intellect, but intuition in humans is a blend of both. Gurudev often says intuition becomes strong when the mind is calm, innocent, and non reactive. When we meditate regularly, our intuition sharpens. We sense situations early, understand people better, and avoid unnecessary complications. Gurudev points out that human beings have this gift naturally, but stress blocks it, like clouds covering the sun. In Vedic scriptures, the intuition or the anta pragya is considered a higher faculty of the mind. Rishis could foresee events because their consciousness was pure. Rituals and chanting purify the mind, feel the chitta, making intuition clearer. Gurudev revives this ancient knowledge in modern times by creating scientific techniques that enhance the intuitive ability. How does fear distort your ability to use this intuition? The fear tightens the nervous system. When the system is contracted, subtle signals cannot be perceived. It's like trying to hear a whisper during a thunderstorm. Gurudev explains that fear creates a noise in the mind, blocking intuition. Meditation expands the inner space and quiets the emotional turbulence. In the silence, the intuition arises naturally, effortlessly. According to Vedic psychology, The intuition comes from the buddhi or the intellect, while fear arises in the manas of the mind. When manas dominates, the buddhi becomes cloudy. Gurudev's wisdom aligns with this, calming the mind, allows the intellect to function. This is why all spiritual paths emphasize fearlessness as a prerequisite of knowledge. Now, what role does surrender play when we feel overwhelmed by challenges? The surrender is not about giving up, it's about giving the burden to the divine or the universe. Gurudev teaches that surrender brings lightness when the mind accepts that not everything is under our control. A deep relief arises. We stop fighting reality. Once resistance drops, clarity emerges, decisions become easier, and stress decreases. Surrender is a psychological and spiritual release. In Vedic Dharma, surrender or the prapatti is the highest path of devotion. When we surrender to Narayana, Shiva, or Devi, the ego dissolves, the divine intelligence begins to guide our actions. This is why even kings and warriors prayed before battles, not out of weakness, but for alignment with the cosmic intelligence. Gurudev's guidance reflects this ageless wisdom. Now, Gurudev says we cry and resist problems like children resisting being awakened. What is the spiritual teaching behind this? Rather, he is showing how often we cling to comfort zones. When life tries to wake us up through challenges, we resist, complain, and cry. But every awakening is for our growth. Problems shake us out of stagnation. Once we wake up, we realize that change was necessary. Gurudev's analogy is compassion. He wants us to see our childishness lovingly and rise above it. Spiritually, awakening is called Bodha. Problems act as catalysts for Bodha. The child in Gurudev's story represents the human ego that prefers sleep, the ignorance over awareness. Vedic texts often say that divine grace sometimes comes disguised as difficulty. Gurudev communicates this ancient truth in a homely and relatable way. How can seekers cultivate this maturity Gurudev is pointing towards? Through regular spiritual practices, the seva, the satsang, and the reflection, and the sudarshan kriyas and the meditations, maturity is not dependent on age, it's dependent on awareness. When you meditate daily, the emotional turbulence settles. When you do seva, ego becomes lighter. When you attend satsang, the wisdom strengthens. Gurudev's method gently builds the inner maturity without forcing it in Vedic lifestyle. The maturity is called the samskara shuddhi, the purification of impressions. Chanting mantras, practicing homas, and studying scriptures refine the inner personality. This creates the dhairya or the courage and vivek or discernment. Gurudev's teachings harmonize beautifully with these ancient disciplines. How does Gurudev use simple language and stories to convey deep truth so effectively? Gurudev's brilliance lies in making the profound simple. He uses everyday examples like children, the rivers, and the mothers, so everyone can understand timeless truths without philosophical complexity. This approach bridges spirituality and practical life. His language feels intimate, relatable, and compassionate. Seekers feel seen and understood. This is the tradition of the rishis. The Upanishads use metaphors, the sparks, the rivers, the birds to express the inexpressible. Gurudev continues the parampara of teaching wisdom through simplicity. His stories carry layers of meaning, accessible to beginners and profound for advanced seekers. Now, Gurudev Now, Gurudev said, when we are stuck in life, we must be careful. What does this really mean? When Gurudev says, when you are stuck in life, you have to be careful, he is pointing towards the inner mindfulness, not fear. Carefulness here means awareness of the mind's tendency to exaggerate. When problems arise, the mind creates a story around them. This is used, this is dangerous, and this may destroy me. In reality, the problem is rarely as big as the narration our mind creates. Gurudev's teaching emphasizes responding, not reacting. Carefulness means you don't let the emotional turbulence hijack your intelligence through breath, sudarshan, kriya, and meditation. You learn to see the problem with clarity rather than panic. In the Vedic tradition, the carefulness is Shraddha plus Dhriti, faith plus steadiness. Scriptures repeatedly say that a disturbed mind magnifies even a small difficulty. In day 2, Gurudev reminds us be careful of how the mind dramatizes problems. In many Puranic stories like Arjuna's despondency in Nachiketa's test, carefulness is the turning point. So Gurudev's teaching aligns with Vedic wisdom. A calm mind is your greatest armor. Now, Gurudev narrates a childhood scene about sleeping in a restaurant and playing in water. Why did he use the story? Gurudev shares these simple childhood episodes to show how fear is conditioned. As children, we react instantly. Water, play, fun. But if someone screams, he's coming, our mind switches to panic without verifying anything. Gurudev uses this story to illustrate how we still believe like that as adults. Someone says, what if this fails? What if life collapses? And suddenly we believe it without checking facts. Gurudev's story shows that fear is often borrowed, not real. And the Vedic style of teaching, a guru uses the parable like experiences to dissolve ego and make us reflect. This playful memory is not just nostalgic, it is symbolic of what it represents the natural flow of life, while the sudden fear represents the external influences that disturb our flow. The Vedas say, Balvat kheliye, the be childlike in spirit, not childish in fear. Gurudev's story beautifully illustrates this truth. Innocence is natural, fear is learned. Now, Gurudev says we fear problems long before they arrive. Why does the human mind function like this? Because the mind is designed for survival, not happiness. It anticipates danger to protect us, but in modern life, this becomes overactive. The mind imagines threats that don't exist. Gurudev constantly reminds us that the mind jumps to the worst case scenario before examining reality. Through breathwork, we learn to quieten this inner noise. Once the mind calms down, you will see the problem is smaller than you imagine. The Vedic psychology calls this the kalpana dosh, a distortion created by imagination. Scriptures say bhayam kalpitam eva, most fears are imagined. Gurudev's teaching dismantles exactly this. The human mind creates fear first, problems later. That's why Gurudev asks us to stay alert to our own imagination and Vedic themselves. Parayanas of Durga Saptasiti Devi is praised as Sintarupa, one who destroys needless anxieties. The mind exaggerates, awareness dissolves. Now, Gurudev says the problem will come. How should we interpret this? The Gurudev is not being pessimistic. He is bringing us to acceptance. Problems are part of life. If you resist them, suffering increases. If you remain centered, problems become opportunities for growth. Gurudev often says life is a combination of happy and challenging moments. We cannot demand only comfort when we accept the natural rhythm of life. Problems lose their sting. In Vedic terms, this is the Prakriti Dharma, the nature of existence. Even avatars and rishis face difficulties. Rama went to forest, Krishna faced war, Sita faced trials. But they remain centered. Gurudev echoes the same wisdom. Don't be shocked by the arrival of problems. Instead, meet them with Dhaira and Viveka. The problem is not the enemy, the agitation of the mind is. Now, why does Gurudev say that we don't know how much effect a problem will have on us? Because we assess problems through emotion, not through reality. Many times we imagine worst outcomes that never occur. Gurudev says that the impact of a problem depends on our understanding, not on the problems itself. If your inner space is vast, even a big challenge feels small. If your inner space is narrow, even a tiny issue feels huge. This aligns with the Upanishadic principle Yatha Bhavam Tat Bhavati. As your state of mind, so becomes your experience. Two people may face the same situation, but their reactions differ based on inner maturity. Gurudev reminds us that fear magnifies impact while awareness reduces it. Now, Gurudev repeatedly says, if you are a human being, you will see what is the deeper meaning. Gurudev means if you pause and observe, truth becomes visible. Most people don't see, they react. Seeing means witnessing the mind's panic, its patterns, and its exaggerations. When we witness, we are dissolved. Gurudev often says, awareness brings freedom in Vedanta. Seeing refers to darshan, the divine perception. To see it, to recognize, is to recognize the temporary nature of every difficulty. The moment you observe a problem rather than merge with it, transmission begins. Now, Gurudev narrates the story about sitting on the river bank in Kerala and Gujarat. What is the symbolic meaning? The river symbolizes the life's flow. Gurudev shows that true places, though places change, Kerala to Gujarat, the inner space remains the same. Problems, the people, the situation shift. But your consciousness is steady like the river bank. Gurudev's message do not become the waves, become the bank. Rivers hold deep symbolic significance in Vedic culture. They represent movement, while river banks represent stability. By narrating this, Gurudev teaches be rooted in your center, even as life moves around you. This is the essence of spiritual maturity. Now, Gurudev said, like I left, the people of Gujarat too left. The whole country was left. What does it mean? Jagadev, this is a poetic way of saying life moves on, everything passes, the people, the situations, the worries. What feels permanent now becomes a memory tomorrow. Understanding this reduces fear and attachment in Vedic philosophy. This is called Anitya Bhava, the truth that everything is temporary. Recognizing impermanence gives courage. Gurudev's words help us loosen our grip on anxiety. Now, Gurudev says, you are all so cruel, you are just like me. Why does he say so? Neither he says it humorously. Gurudev means that we all treat our minds harshly. We force our minds into fear, pressure, expectations. He includes himself in the statement to remove hierarchy and create intimacy. He teaches through playfulness. In scriptures, Gurudev often use playful teasing to awaken students. When Gurudev says cruel, he means we are cruel to ourselves by overthinking and worrying unnecessarily. Now, Gurudev speaks about mother cannot change her child. What is the spiritual meaning? It means certain situations in life cannot be changed immediately, just as a mother accepts her child as he is. We must accept some aspects of life. Acceptance brings peace. Resistance brings suffering. Vedic wisdom says, Swabhavo na jahati, nature does not change quickly. Gurudev teaches us to embrace life's realities while strengthening ourselves internally. Acceptance is not weakness, it is wisdom. Now, Gurudev says some children. Now, how do Gurudev's anecdotes help dissolve fear in a spiritual seeker? Gurudev's story creates emotional intimacy. You feel you are sitting with him in a living room, not listening to a lecture. Stories bypass the analytical mind and directly touch the heart. When the heart relaxes, the fear dissolves. His anecdotes remind us that he has lived through the same human experiences we all have, the childhood fears, the questions, the uncertainties. This creates identification. If Gurudev could transcend fear, I can too. His stories are mirrors in which seekers see their own mind and gently let go. Now, in the Sanatan Dharma, the Guru's personal stories act like Upanishads. The parables, they convey true, deep truths through simplicity. Just like Yajnavalkya used metaphors to teach Maitri, Gurudev uses anecdotes to make profound wisdom accessible. Fear dissolves when understanding dawns. Stories carry this understanding effortlessly. Now, Gurudev emphasizes that the mind exaggerates problems. How do art of living techniques help with this exaggeration? Like the Sudarshan Kriya resets the mind's hyperactive fear circuitry. When breath rhythms change, emotional storms settle. Meditation improves the gap between stimulus and response. Instead of reacting to imagined dangers, you begin to see reality. Process like the Art of Living Part 1 course, the Sehat Samadhi meditation, and DS and empower individuals to stop magnifying problems and start living with clarity. Gurudev often says, when the mind is quiet, life is loud. A calm mind sees truth, a loud mind sees danger. From a Vedic standpoint, breath practices are equivalent to prana samyana taught in the Yoga Shastras. Prana governs the mind. When prana is erratic, the mind imagines threats. When prana is stable, fear subsides. Gurudev's techniques are modern expressions of this ancient wisdom. Now, what does Gurudev mean when he says problems come to make you strong? Then he means that challenges are the gymnasium for the soul. Without resistance, muscles don't go. Similarly, without problems, inner strength doesn't develop. Gurudev teaches that life doesn't give you problems, it gives you chances to evolve. Every difficulty you overcome expands your capacity. When you look back, you will see that the periods that shaped you most were not the easy ones, but the ones that demanded courage, resilience, and surrender. In scriptures, this principle is called the tapas, the transmute of heat. Heat purifies gold, challenges purify consciousness. The rishis, the kings, even the devas undergo tapas. Gurudev is reviving this timeless truth. Stop avoiding problems, start using them as tools for growth. Now, why does Gurudev emphasize witnessing the mind rather than fighting with it? Because without anything you fight, because anything you fight becomes stronger. If you resist fear, the fear grows. If you suppress anger, the anger intensifies. Gurudev teaches the art of witnessing, the observing thoughts like clouds passing in the sky. When you witness, you create distance between you and me. The distance is freedom. Vedanta calls this the Sakshi Bhav, the attitude of the witness. The witness is untouched, unshaken. Gurudev's teaching is identical. Become the sky, not the storm. Once you witness, the mind loses control over you. Now, Gurudev uses humor while talking about fear. Why humor? The humor breaks psychological rigidity. When you laugh, fear melts instantly. Gurudev knows that fear thrives in seriousness but collapses in lightness. Humor also brings humility. You stop taking our problems too seriously. A smiling mind is a powerful mind. Humor has always been part of the Vedic teaching. Many saints like the Kabir, the Narasimha Mehta, the Tenali Raman use humor to reveal spiritual truths, and laughter makes wisdom digestible. Gurudev continues this lineage. Now, how do the Vedic instances rituals support Gurudev's teachings on handling problems? There are the rituals like the Ganapati Homa, Durga Saptasati Parayanams, the Navagraha Shanti, and the Mahamrityunjaya Homa purify the subtle environment. They remove the adrashta obstacles, the unseen karmic blocks. When the environment around a person is purified, clarity arises and fear reduces. Gurudev's teaching on acceptance, awareness, and surrender is perfectly complemented by Vedic rituals that surrender and strengthen the inner atmosphere. Together, they form a powerful system. Yoga calms the mind, Homa cleanses the surroundings, mantra stabilizes the consciousness. Art of living integrates these rituals beautifully. Seva and sadhana prepare the heart. Homas prepare the energy field. Both are needed. Now, why does Gurudev emphasize the temporary nature of all problems? Because remembering impermanence brings instant relief. Every problem you once thought unbearable has already passed. When you realize this, the fear loosens. Gurudev wants seekers to stop giving permanent labels to temporary situations. The Bhagavad Gita says, Ashashvatam sarvam, everything is fleeting. Gurudev's teaching is a living expression of this verse. Now, how does devotion help in facing life's challenges? Devotion connects you to a higher intelligence. When you trust the divine, Fear dissolves because you no longer feel alone. You recognize that a greater power is guiding your journey. Devotion also softens the heart, and a soft heart is fearless. In Vedic tradition, devotion is the bhakti yoga, the simplest path to courage. When you lean on the divine, your burdens becomes lighter. Gurudev's wisdom and the rituals of the sansan both cultivate this strength. Now, Gurudev beautifully gives the example of, yeah, Gurudev often says that most problems appear bigger only because we keep holding at them from very close. So how does changing perspective reduce fear according to both wisdom and Vedic tradition? Jagadav Gurudev frequently explains that when we stare at any problem for too long, it magnifies in the mind. It's not the problem that becomes bigger, it's a mental lens that shrinks. Meditation creates this inner distance, a gentle space between me and the situation. When we close our eyes, breathe deeply, and settle into silence, the mind expands and the problem automatically looks smaller, just like a mountain seems huge when you stand at its base. When you can rise above in a plane, the same mountain looks tiny. Sadhana lifts our awareness to a higher altitude. From there, fear cannot dominate. Perspective becomes a wisdom, and wisdom dissolves unnecessary panic. Gurudev says you only see the problem from one angle, rise a little, and the whole picture changes. Now, in the Vedic worldview, this principle is expressed through the idea of Drishti Srishti. The world appears based on a vision. Rishis emphasize the Uttan Drishti, the elevated gaze, teaching students to rise above limited viewpoints. Texts like the Yoga Vasistha and the Bhagavad Gita repeatedly say, become the witness of the Sakshi. But when we adopt the witness perspective, we stop identifying with fear. The problem becomes just an event, not an identity. The Vedic wisdom shows that fear cannot survive when awareness becomes vast. Now, Gurudev shared a story about sleeping in a restaurant as a child and being pulled out in fear. How does the story symbolically explain how fear tracks us unnecessarily? Jagadev, Gurudev's childhood anecdote is simple yet profoundly symbolic. As a child, he was peacefully sleeping, unaware of any threat. Jagadev in Vedic psychology, this experience symbolizes the asadbhaya, the fear of something unreal. Scriptures explain that humans suffer more than from imagined threats than real ones. The Upanishads describe fear as a shadow. It grows only when we turn our back to light. The story also shows collective fear, how one person's anxiety can ripple into another's life. Rishis advise grounding practices like chanting, the breath regulation, and invoking the divine protection to prevent being swept away by the other's fear. The story thus reflects a timeless truth. Uncontrolled fear drags the mind, but wisdom anchors it. Check with it.